Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Catholic Truth Podcast. Today, we have a wonderful episode with a man who needs no introductions. He's been here several times, and his name is Steve Ray. And he has talked extensively in the past about apologetics and his conversion from being super anti-Catholic to now being a Catholic apologist. And today, he's going to be talking about how your kids can be Catholic and how to keep them Catholic in this culture. And this man is the one to do it. He's been married for 48 years and he has 4 adult kids from 33 to 48. They're all married themselves. They all have kids. And in fact, he has 20 grandchildren. 6 of them are in great Catholic universities. And the 2 oldest grandsons are getting married to wonderful Catholic girls. They have new kids. Their families are growing and literally their kids are all Catholic. So what did he do right? And what can he teach us? And what can we learn from him who has a great family of Catholicism and not getting slaughtered by the world? Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Bryan. Always happy to join you. And I enjoyed seeing you in person, I think, for the first time at the men's conference.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, it's always good to have you back on the show. I'm super excited because our culture is toxic. Our world is suffocating. Our public schools are destroying. And it's like even good Catholic families have a hard time keeping their kids Catholic. But you seem to know some secrets that other people may not, or maybe you have some helpful tips after 48 years of marriage and a whole life of apologetics and ministry. So, I'd like to get started asking you some of these questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
All right, great. So, first of all, is it even possible? I mean, you did it, but it seems like it's impossible sometimes. But is it possible in our modern world to keep our kids Catholic? And if so, how?
I think the answer to that is yes, though there are certainly no guarantees. There's no silver bullet or guarantees that our kids are all going to grow up Catholic, because every person has their own free will and they can decide and choose their own way. And all of them can get poor friends. Paul says bad company corrupts good morals. And if they get in with the wrong kids, but we always pretty much controlled that. I know people say that I was controlling, but the end result seems pretty good. I learned the hard way, everything. And I would say that the bottom line is, if you are living your life with your career and golfing and making money and planning your vacation is the most important thing in your life, you're not going to have great success with your kids, because kids don't raise themselves. Kids love what their parents love. A dad who sits around drinking beer and watching sports all weekend, guess what his kids are going to do? They're very likely his boys are going to do the same. When we got married, we had a mission statement, and it was 2 points. Number one, my wife and we were evangelical Protestants at the time. We weren't Catholic. I was 21, she was 19. I am a firm believer in marrying young. And we made up a mission statement. It was 2 points. We were going to prove to the world that a man and a woman could stay married together in a monogamous relationship, faithful to each other for a lifetime. We were going to prove, point 2, that we could raise kids that would do the same. And all of our energy, all of our time, the number one priority was always those 2 things. That was what we talked about. It's what we planned for. I had a job. Sometimes I was starting my own business. I worked 100 hours a week at times getting it built, but never did I abandon my number 1 and number 2 mission statement points. And we lived that way. As somebody used to ask me, Steve, what are you? Meaning, what do you do for a living? Is I knew what they meant, but I'd always say, well, I'm a Christian and a husband and a father. Oh, I don't mean that. I mean, what do you do? I said, well, you asked me what I am, and I am a Christian and a husband and a father. Now, if you want to know what I do to make money to pay for that, that's a different story. I always viewed the career, the job, and I've never worked for anybody. I've always owned my own companies. I started a couple of them. And I always viewed my job as a way to make money and give me freedom in order to do what my real calling in life was to do. And that was to be a husband and a father, and now a grandfather, and maybe very soon a great grandfather. But if you have that goal in mind, that's the foundation for starting to raise your kids with the hopes that they'll stay Catholic as they get older. If you don't have that objective in mind, if that's not the foundation, if you build on sand instead of on rock, then your chances are minimized that you're going to have kids that stay Catholic, because the kids are going to love what you love. And if they see that I'm a firm Catholic believer, a disciple of Jesus Christ, that's what makes my heart pound. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's what I love to do. That's what we discuss at the kitchen and dining room table. And I know a lot of your listeners know Al Cresta. He was on Catholic radio. He was one of the brightest men I've ever known, Catholic, and he was but originally he was Protestant. And we were best friends when our family started Kids in Diapers. We've been best friends for 21 years. He died about 4 or 5 months ago, way too early at 71 years old. But we made a plan back when our kids were in diapers that we were going to raise our kids as though Jesus Christ was real. Imagine that. We were going to raise them as if Jesus is the Lord of anything. He's the Lord of everything. And every decision would be discussed in our family. Why are we doing this instead of that? Why are we living this way instead of that way? What are we going to talk about at the kitchen table? And we did it as though Christianity were true, and we immersed our kids in that, and we made Christianity fun. Our family was fun. We did fun things, but it was always because we're Christians. And our kids grew up loving the faith. They loved Jesus. They loved going to church because we made that fun too. So I think that the foundation of it is that you have to live the life, or it's not going to work. It doesn't happen by itself. It takes a plan. It takes a mission statement. It takes, my wife and I stayed up till 3 or 4 in the morning sometimes saying, okay, our kids are at a new stage of development now. How are we going to handle these things? How are we going to handle disobedience now differently than we did when they were 2 years old? And we took our job as parents seriously. And that's what started the whole thing. If you don't want to do that, then there's no guarantees your kids are going to come out right. In fact, they may not. One last word I would say, though, just in passing, because a lot of people are going to be watching this, the kids didn't turn out well. And they're going to say, well, that's easy for you to say. I sent my kids to Catholic schools. I did this, I did that. I would say that those who have not had great success with their kids, and the kids have left the faith either to become secularists or Protestants or some other religion, and some even who have now hostility because of these things between them, tomorrow is a new day. And I would suggest to those parents, sit down, reevaluate the relationship with your children, write them a letter, admit the things that you did wrong, tell them what you thought you did right, apologize for the things you did wrong, things you may have said wrong, emphases you had in your life, maybe on career and sports and neglecting the raising of the kids. Tell them what you did wrong. Say, I love you. You're the most important thing. I've learned my lesson. I want to start over with you. Can we have a new beginning? And I think that would go a long way for parents who haven't had great success to get a new start.
Yeah, you make so many good points, because I've seen that in my family too. People called my mother controlling. We called my mother controlling because maybe she was, but it was for our good. She really cared about our soul. She really wanted to raise us and keep us from the world. So,
right.
If we told her, hey, I'm going over to Johnny's to do homework, she'd be like, great, have fun. And then while we're over there, she'd call his mother to see if I actually went there or if I lied. And she caught us lying a couple times. So she always kept up with us, to make sure what we were watching, what we were listening to, what we were doing. And she always was giving us prayer cards, forcing books down our throat of the religious nature, things we didn't watch, dragging us to church, even though we didn't want to. She made our faith the most important thing, which is why we're still in it, at least most of us.
Look what you're doing now.
Yes. Oh my gosh. For someone who used to dress in all black and carry and do really hate the world like myself, she prayed for me. She sacrificed for me. She cried for me every night. And, she continually forced all that religious stuff on me. And tried to, get me back. So, and then the other thing is I see parents who do bring their kids to church. They do maybe pray before dinner, but their kids are watching endless hours of TV or playing video games, or they're engrossed so much in the world. The world is also raising them. So they oftentimes don't have a shot because the world is so strong and, like big.
Yep. Going to mass on Sunday and praying before dinner is not going to make your kids Catholic. It's a good start. But even kids hate going to mass most of the time. They would rather be playing baseball, chasing girls. This is me. That was my boyhood. But, my dad was smart and I did the same thing. I watch parents in mass that ignore their kids. They walk in, they sit there and they're so devout, they're totally focused forward. And I understand why. They want to celebrate mass and be involved in the mass, but they're ignoring their kids. My dad, and people may not like this, but it worked. My dad used to bring little candies along, and we knew where they were in his pocket, and we could reach in his pocket and get them anytime we wanted. In fact, when my dad died, he wanted in his suit coat while he was laying in his coffin to have all those little red hot candies. And all the kids went by his coffin and reached into the coffin and took those candies out of his pocket to remember what Grandpa always did. But Dad would also put his arm around me during church and he'd tickle my ear and he would whisper to me things like, oh, did you hear that? That was pretty interesting. And he would teach us the words of the hymns. And he would belt out those hymns like he was a opera singer. He couldn't sing very well, but he'd belt them out like he was. And we had fun going to church because Dad included us in it. When Dad was sitting there tickling my ear during the Baptist preacher preaching, I thought Dad had all of his focus on me. Touching kids has that effect. You think that all the attention's on you. And so we didn't mind going to church. It was a time Dad was with us, Mom and Dad. They didn't let us fight and argue in church. They separated us, but they all paid attention to us. Dad would show us the words of the hymns. He'd help us understand where the verses were in the Bible. And I think if Catholics did that, to get the missal out, go through it with their kids, sit in the back if you have to, sit in the cry room for a while until the kids actually know what's going on so you can talk to them and explain what's going on. Include the kids, make them know that you love them at mass. Don't go to mass and the kids say, okay, here, I'm going to get ignored by Mom and Dad for an hour. And then my dad, he made it so that going to church was not a tedious thing. It was a fun thing. Now, I would say two things that a dad can do. There's a lot of things a dad can do, but I'm going to say two of the most important, I think, is number one, the most important.
Just so you know, right before you get into that, I have a book on the other side of the room. It's called Father Facts. It talks about how important it is for a father to be involved in a child's life. And if they're not, the numbers in the jails are higher, flunking out of school, drug use, all of these things. I mean, fatherhood is so important. Sorry, just a side thought you got me thinking about.
For boys and for girls. Yes. For boys and especially for girls. Because if girls don't have the love of a father, they're going to go look for the love of a male figure somewhere else. Yeah. The dad needs to. I remember when my daughters developed, and it's kind of like a little more uncomfortable to put them on your lap. But I said, you know what? I'm going to put you on my lap anyway because I love you. And I love you even when you grow up into a teenage girl. Come on here. I'm going to pull you over and sit on my lap and kiss you because I think will kiss your cheek because I think you're beautiful and I love you. Well, they knew that Dad loved them. They didn't have to go find cheap love from someone else. So the number one thing, let's do this. The number one thing a father can do for his children, most important, is to love their mother. Somebody will say, well, excuse me, I got a little sore throat. Some people say, oh, no, teaching them how to pray and going to mass and doing those things are the number one. Now, I'm still going to stick to my guns. Loving their mother is the first thing. Because if a kid sees acrimony between mom and dad and they see fighting and dad doesn't really love mom and they have their own separate lives, you could take them to mass all you want. You're not going to impress them. Because if they don't have a loving home and they don't have a dad who's an example of going to church and praying and loving in a close relationship with his wife, the kids aren't going to pay attention to you about anything else. So loving the family. And part of that also means disciplining the kids, because how can I love my wife if the kids are being a bully to her, yelling at her, disobeying her, causing contention, arguing with her? I never let my kids do that. And I would stop them. Whoa, whoa, whoa. That's my girlfriend you're talking to. Her and I were good girlfriend and boyfriend long before you came here, and we're going to be boyfriend and girlfriend long after you're gone. And if you think I'm going to let you come in here and disrupt the relationship I have with your mom, you got another thing coming, buddy. You yell at her, you're going to have to deal with me. And you know what? To this day, our kids adore their mother because I taught them to adore their mother from the youngest of ages. So loving your wife and teaching your kids to love their wife, normally by keeping peace and quiet and discipline. That's the father's job, by the way, is the most important. I think next thing, and you already mentioned it, get rid of the television. The Catholic family has no business having the television on all the time. Now, you could see in the background right there, I have a television. You could see it right behind me on that side, but it's not hooked to anything. We watch movies. We watch DVDs. We stream things. It's all under our control. And even if something has commercials, we argue with the commercials. What are they trying to tell you? Listen to that right there. What did he just say? And all of the commercials have dogs. Did you notice that, kids? Dogs are more important than people nowadays in the family. And I say to our girls, whether it's a magazine rack at a grocery store you're going through or commercials on TV, do you think that girl's real? You look at her and you say, oh, she's so much prettier than I am. Do you think she's real? Do you know how many hours they spent in makeup to make her look like that? And then they digitize everything and they make her eyes a little farther apart and her lips a little thicker. I taught my kids to argue with commercials and with superficial things. So my kids look critically at things today and they don't get overwhelmed by them. So love your wife. Most important thing a dad could do. Get rid of the television. My dad would not buy me a television, Bryan. We grew up without a television. My kids grew up without television. And now my grandchildren are grown up without television.
Wait, did you have one as a family, or are you just saying they didn't have their own?
Never have your own. Never did our kids were allowed a computer or a television in their room. If we were going to do it, it would be in the living room. The computers were all in the living room. We had a television, and my kids have television, but it's for watching movies. Like my son has.
So like a
kids.
once in a while thing. It's not just watching it all
Saturday
the time.
night. Our grandkids, my son, Saturday night, they know it's movie night. And any movie that you talk to them about, they'll know about it because they've watched it together. Good ones and even not so good ones. Because my son teaches them how to think about what they're seeing. Not just to sit there and go, like kids do. But he'd stop the movie and say, what did you think about what they just said and did there? Was that right? Should they have done that? What if they had done this? See, so Saturday night is a fun night. They make popcorn. They make special drinks and they have a fun time. They got a big room with all couches and big TV screen. But it's all
I want to go.
I know. And that's the thing. The kids love it. And they don't need to go other places to see TV because they watch all. If you mention any modern movie, they pretty much will know those movies because they've watched them. And what it does is it teaches kids to think about things. A lot of parents just try to scare them. Oh, don't watch it. My mother used to say to me, the Beatles are from the devil. You can't listen to the Beatles. They're from the devil. I'd say, Mom, how do you know they're from the devil? She could never teach me how to think about it or to listen to the music with me and discuss it. Now, my daughter, she got older, that it was a heavy rock group time, and all her friends some of them were listening to this heavy rock metal music. And she said, Dad, my friends are listening to this. And I said, well, let's go buy one. So we jumped in the car after dinner. And it was back in the day when you had albums. Most kids don't even know what a 33 and a third album is. But we went and bought it, came home, and she was holding the bag and kind of handed it to me. I said, well, aren't you going to go listen to it? She said, well, Dad, I thought maybe you'd want to listen to it first. I said, no, Cindy, you're a smart girl. Why don't you go listen to it and come back and tell me what you think about it? She came back down 2 hours later with the album back in a bag. And she said, Dad, it's not the kind of thing I think I should listen to. We should probably take it back. Now, see, this is teaching a kid to think. If I told him that all that music is bad, you should never touch it, that's going to make it the forbidden fruit. It's going to entice her to want it, right? But let you listen to it and decide what you think. And I taught my kids to think about things, not to just be afraid of things.
Kind of like if you say, oh, don't look at that woman. She's immodestly dressed. That's bad. No, actually, the body's really good and beautiful, which is why we want to look. But how can we look properly?
And it's going to make that boy want to look. Yeah, exactly. Now, my dad in lieu of having a television, he read us stories every night. So we knew that after dinner, he came home at 5 o'clock every night. In fact, he turned down promotions. I asked him one time, Dad, why did you have the same job for 30 years at Ford Motor Company? You never got promoted when I got home. He said, well, Steve, they always called me in to promote me, but I always asked them one question. Will I have to work weekends and evenings if I take this extra pay? And they said, yes, of course. It's added responsibility. He said, I have to turn you down. And because I have 3 sons at home that need me more than Henry Ford does. And my dad turned down all the promotions so that he could stay at that little humble position he had at Ford's, but he could be home at 5 o'clock and he was home on weekends. And Dad always sat at the dinner table and talked to us while we ate. We always prayed. He always hugged my mom when she went by. And with the food, he'd always hug her. And my mom would say, oh, Bob, you're going to make me spill the food. And he said, I want the boys to know I love you. After dinner, Mom cleaned up and Dad read us stories every night. He read us stories about heroes and Western figures and cowboys and Indians and all the saints. Oh, he read us so many stories. And then at night, he would pray with us all as he put us to bed, and he would sing the same song. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. How I love that old cross, where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. He sang all 4 verses to us every night. Still here, still right there in my mind. Now, my brothers, we all are still Christians to this day, even though we went through public schools and everything else. So this is just some ideas. Dads need to be involved. Turn the TV off, read books to the kids, spend time with them, teach them how to pray. Tonight, when the kids we have grandkids coming over tonight for dinner. They already packed their backpacks at 7 o'clock this morning and said, we're ready to go to Nana and Papa's. They're not coming over until later, but they're already waiting to go. They know we're going to pray the rosary together. But we don't just pray the rosary. We talk about it as we pray it. And we learn to memorize the Bible verses. The first joyful mystery of the Annunciation, Luke chapter 1. What is it, kids? 26 through 38. And so we have fun even doing that, looking at pictures.
I think that's an important point you make, because you don't just pray, but you teach. You know, like a lot of people just go through the motions of praying. Oh, we said a rosary every night and my kids fell away from the faith. Well, did they understand it? Did they love it? Did they understand their faith? And more importantly, you taught them how to be critical. That's my thing. We are sorely lacking in apologetics today. Our kids can't defend their faith to save their soul. So if they get attacked, they don't know what to say. They don't know how to respond. They feel embarrassed. They feel like religion is for fools. So I like what you did. You taught them how to pray. You all prayed together, but you also taught them their faith, and you just made it part of everyday life. It wasn't like everyday life exists and then we'll try to fit it in where we can.
Right. And you can role play. Have dinner at time to role play. What happens if somebody says this to you about the Eucharist? Or what if somebody says this about the papacy? How do you respond? Practice. Our kids were in clubs that actually at a parish we went to, a father started an apologetics club with all his kids. And all the other kids in the parish wanted to join, and they'd line up on 2 sides of the room, and this side would act as the Protestant or the atheist or whatever the topic was that day. And then the Catholics would learn how to fire back and answer their questions. Well, guess what? Those kids are Catholic today because they learned how to love, not just to defend it, but to love their faith, because mom and dad loved it, and kids love what their mom and dad love.
And that goes back to the point where you need to love your spouses. And I would say, I'll let you comment on this, but if you don't love your spouse and you have been fighting and you have been leading a bad example and you're worried about your kids, I mean, my parents fought constantly. We always feared they were going to get divorced. And it's amazing that actually they did get separated for 7 years, which was the best thing for them, because they started getting help. They started going adoration. Now they are back together. They had like a second honeymoon. They're in a new house. They pray the rosary together. They go to Latin mass together. They pray and do everything together now, like they should have done to begin with.
Very nice.
From a young age, I had no idea what it meant to be a father or a dad. All I knew is dysfunction. And every family I knew was dysfunctional. So When I went to Franciscan University, I spent a lot of time on family weekends just sitting in the middle of the campus and watching how the fathers treated their mothers. And it was amazing with what tenderness and love they treated them, their wives with. And that taught me a lesson. I just soaked it in. Because it's not enough to say, oh, I'm not going to be like my parents. You have to say, I don't want to do that, but this is what I'm going to do instead. If you don't have what you want to do, you don't have a picture of what you want to be, it's not going to happen.
We asked our kids, why did you get married so young? And they said, because you and mom had so much fun together. We wanted to have what you guys had as soon as we could. And they do. They all,
If you don't mind me adding one more thing, Scott Hahn once said something that shocked me. I was in his biblical studies class, and he said that a family that prays together does not stay together necessarily. He said, if you pray together, but you don't work on your personal issues and you're fighting all the time and you don't work on those things really that are really shaping your mental health, he said, you're not going to stay together because these things are going to pull you apart. Yes, it's important to pray together.
Absolutely.
And we need to do that a lot, but we also need to work on ourselves.
Right, exactly. And just as much, I like to say the family that prays together stays together. Also, the family that plays together stays together. Playing with the family makes family life fun. And therefore, because we're Catholics, you include that in the playing, having fun together, doing things together. Family that prays together, plays together, stays together. So, yeah, you're right. It's not just praying together. In fact, prayer could actually be a turnoff, because I know somebody that insists. In fact, he tried to bully me, and I said, just leave it alone. That you have to pray all the decades of the rosary, all 4 of them every day. The mysterious, the joyful, the luminous. Now, if somebody wants to do that, that's fine. But if you're going to rope your kids into doing that and spend over an hour and a half every day doing that, I would guess, if it was me, I would grow up despising the Eucharist. I mean, the rosary. I'd end up despising it because I'm being forced to do this over and over again, an hour and a half of my day, where all I can see my friends out the window playing, and I wish I was out there with them. So you can do. Also, you can use religion to actually damage the kids if you're not careful. So you have to understand kids, and every kid is different. And we homeschooled our kids. That was the best thing we ever did. And with the schools the way they are today, if there's not a good Catholic school or private school in your area, homeschooling is an option. And I guess
public schools will destroy their kids.
They will destroy. There's really
almost
no
no matter how
excuse
Catholic
today.
they are.
Yep. Now, my one daughter has 2 of her young kids going to school, but she lives in a state where it's very Christian, southern state, and it's a very nice school. Now, what she'll do when they get into junior high is another story. But right now, it's a very Christian environment, even in the public school.
Yeah, the younger schools can be good.
My wife decided in 1978, when our daughter was 1 year old, or just born, actually, she said, I'm going to homeschool my kids because I cannot give them away to somebody else for the best 8 hours of the day. It's unconscionable to give my kids to somebody else with the best 8 hours of their day, somebody I don't even know. So I'm going to keep them home. I guarantee they'll be able to read. I'll be able to control their friends and who they're with. But they're not going to be socialized. They were in Boy Scouts, they were in Girl Scouts and dance class. They were so busy, our kids, but they were all we were supervising who they spent their time with. And when they got older and teenagers, I saw sometimes they would tend to go over here. I'd pull them back and I say, you're not allowed to be there with that group of people. And they were angry at me sometimes, but now they thank me for saving their lives.
Amen. But, Steve, this all sounds, high and mighty, fun and dandy, but some people are looking at this and saying, I've already messed up. My kids are already away from the faith. And I feel like I've messed up as a parent. Maybe I did it wrong. What would you tell these parents who don't know what to do and don't know how to bring their kids back?
I would say, first of all, don't beat yourself up. We make mistakes. There was no classes we had to go through to how to be parents. You don't have to get a graduate degree in raising kids, nor do you have to go for refresher courses every time they turn another 2 or 3 years older. So I would, and the generation before, it wasn't a big topic of discussion. When I was growing up, my mom and dad, there weren't books or classes or discussions of this. You
Mm.
didn't talk about sex. You didn't talk about money. And I started in a generation where we did more talking about those things, but still it's uncomfortable for fathers to talk to their kids about sex. I made up my mind I was going to do that right from the beginning.
Because
We
if you
lived on a
don't, the
little
world
farm.
will.
Oh boy. And they think, well, I'll wait till they're 18. Are you kidding? Your son has already been watching pornography. He's already been talking about this if he hasn't already been doing things that you have no idea what he's
Down
doing.
to like 10 years old or younger.
That's right. You got to talk to your kids to be the first ones. I said, I'm going to be the first ones to talk to my kids about sex. So guess what happened? As time went on, they would come to ask me questions because they knew dad will always be honest with me and he's not shy about these things. Now it helped that we had a little farm and Mr. Goat would jump on top of Mrs. Goat. And 9 months later, Mrs. Goat would have babies. And they would say, Dad, why is he jumping on Mama Goat like that? Why are the rabbits jumping on each other like that? Well, I would explain to them, this is how babies are made. And they knew that right from a young age, that this is how babies are, this is where you came from. And, oh, that's gross, Dad. That's really gross. But I was honest with them. And as they grew, I gave them a little more information, a little more information. They weren't going to sex ed classes in the public schools. Dad and mom taught them. And we did it on the farm where they could see it, nature doing what it does, and babies coming along. And by the way, our kids noticed that there was only male goats and female goats. There weren't other genders of goats, that there were male goats and female goats. And no, our kids never even dreamed that there being other kind of animals. And so
Amen.
other genders. And
And let me
so,
just add that my mom, I was in public schools and my mom refused to let me do health classes. And this goes back to what you said. You have to be 100% invested in your
right,
kids' lives
right,
all the time, all
right.
the time. And the schools will say, well, if he doesn't take health class, he won't graduate. And she used to respond, she's like, I'm his mother. I will teach him these things. He's not taking health class and he will graduate. So she fought the public schools. I didn't take
Good
health
for her.
classes. I got study halls instead, which was great. And
Yeah.
she taught me these things. And goes back to what you were saying, be invested in your kid's life in every detail.
Yep, that's right. And some people will think you're being obnoxious, but the fact is that we've been given a responsibility by God. These kids are a divine responsibility, an obligation that we have. For those parents who have failed, don't beat yourself up. We all make mistakes. I was taught the wrong things by the world when I was growing up, but my wife and I became very strong evangelical Protestants, and that's what swayed us. We started reading the right books and hearing the right talks and learning. So we learned how to do these things, but it was a lot of hard work. And back in those days, the books weren't available. There was a guy named James Dobson from Focus on the Family,
Mhm.
and he was basically our mentor. I bought all of his books. And disciplining. I was not afraid to use corporal discipline. My kids got spanked and they knew that spanking hurt and there were consequences for certain behaviors. And yes, we gave them timeouts for some things, but for defiance, for lying, for stealing, from the capital offenses, there was corporal punishment. And the kids knew that, and that curbed their behavior. And my dad spanked me, and it didn't hurt me a bit. In fact, I never had more respect for my father than when he took me in the bedroom and said, Steve, I love you. I don't want to do this, but it's my obligation to teach you. And you have to learn that choices have consequences, and bad choices are painful. And he would explain it to me. These are the rules you broke. I'd get a good spanking, and he'd stay with me and hug me and cuddle with me until I was over it and tell me how much he loved me and why he did it. And we walked out of the room together, and I held my head high because I had a dad that loved me enough to discipline me. And I did the same with my kids. And it's we as parents today are afraid to, one of the things that's sad is that I watch little kids 3, 4, 5, 6 years old who are bullies, and they completely dominate their father. The father's the big strong guy, and that little kid dominates his father. So I say, well, what do you want to do?
Or mother.
That little kid has no idea what he wants to do. He has no idea what he wants to eat for dinner. He'll eat chocolate and ice cream if you give him his choice. Dads have to put the pants on and be dads and teach the kids how to make choices, not let the kids make all the choices and bully their parents
I
and
saw a
bully. And
mother
they,
once when I worked at Blockbuster, and she said, can I get this? And I said, that video game actually has pornographic material in it. Like if you do a certain amount of tricks, you unlock this bad stuff. And the woman turns, she said, oh, I didn't know that. And she turns to the kid, she said, Johnny, this man says the game is bad and you shouldn't play it. And he literally thought about it for a second. He said, Mom, I don't care. And she said, well, okay. And she got it for him. Like kids are running the parents.
it is, the inmates are running the asylum. And, and if that kid can dominate his mother that much at that age, wait till he's 15 or 16. There's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
disaster. And I think and I'll get criticized for saying this from some quarters, but I think the biggest problem in our culture today in the United States is fatherless homes. Young men, especially, being raised without fathers to discipline them, to be an example to them, and young girls being raised without a father in the home who then go out and find love elsewhere. The one plague that our country has more than any is fatherless homes. And even if there is a father,
Amen.
normally that father is disengaged.
Amen. Yeah, too caught up in work, too caught up in
Yep.
sports, fantasy
Yep.
sports, all these other things, just being on the computer. It's like we need to be totally invested in our kids, put all of that aside and spend
Yep.
our time with them. Steve, we only have like 3 minutes, but can you talk about what it means to raise a rebel?
Oh, I have a talk called Raising Rebels, and I taught my kids to rebel against the culture. We're not part of American culture anymore. Our culture is like a sludgy river going down, and it's polluted and it's going to a very bad end. We are not going to flow. Only dead things float downstream. We're going to swim upstream. We're going to be rebels against the culture of death. We're going to say no to the world. I'll use the example. My kids were in a pool. We said, if you go around and around, you can cause a whirlpool. And they said, oh, come on. Well, we did, and it got a whirlpool going. It went down in the middle, splashed up on the sides. I said, now let's pretend that this current is the world, and the world is trying to force us to go along with its way of thinking, its way of doing things. What if we say, no, we're going to be real Christians, and we go against the tide. We swim against it. Let's try it, kids, see what happens. So we all turned around and started going the other way. And the harder we pulled, some of the kids got tired. I can't go anymore. And little Maria Faustina said to Sammy, swim, Sammy, swim. You don't want to go to hell, Sammy. Don't give up, swim. And we kept pushing against that tide. And not only did it make them stronger, but in the end, we got the whirlpool going the other way. And the lesson was, if we follow along with this, we're going to die. But if we turn around and go the other way, it's going to make us stronger. And eventually, maybe we can get the tide to turn and go the other way again if we get enough people to join us. So I taught my kids to be rebels. I'll close with my son and his buddies. They had a pledge, 5 boys. They pledged they were going to protect their eyes. And they had a thing called a babe alert. So they would go to a amusement park and one would say, babe alert, babe alert. And they would all look away
Wow.
to prevent them from looking at a girl with not enough clothes on. And
Wow.
they made a pledge that they were going to all marry as virgins and protect each other from pornography, and they did.
Wow.
And this is what I meant by raising rebels. You teach kids to rebel against the culture for good reasons. And I told them, this family that you're a part of is a club. It's a unique, exclusive club. You can only get born into it, and don't do anything so stupid as to get kicked out of this club. It would be the biggest mistake of your life. This club is the most valuable thing you have. And the kids always viewed our family as a club they wanted to stay part of. And now the grandkids want to be part of it.
Amen. 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 So much good wisdom, Stephen. Thank you for sharing. Where can people find you, especially if they want to learn more about this sort of thing?
CatholicConvert.com. Sorry, the doorbell's ringing, but CatholicConvert.com. I've got all our pilgrimages. We're still taking Catholic and biblical sites. We're going to be getting back to Israel soon. I got all my books. I've got the talk, Raising Rebels, and I've got all these things online. So CatholicConvert.com.
Great. And do you have a YouTube channel?
I do. If you go to my homepage, CatholicConvert.com, you'll see my X account, my Facebook account, my YouTube account. And if you just go to YouTube and type in Steve Ray, some of them are going to be Stevie Ray Vaughan or something, but you're
You'll
going to
either
get
get
a
Stevie Ray
lot.
Vaughan, Steve Ray, or Catholic Truth with Steve Ray.
Yep. And so you'll find all kinds of my videos. And I didn't put them up there. Other people have put them up there, but there's a lot of stuff up there. So
Great.
CatholicConvert.com is kind of the hub that goes in all different directions from that source.
And I'll link that below. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, Steve.
You're welcome.
We appreciate it.
God bless you. Keep up the good work. And tell your mom thanks for raising you well.
Amen. Thank you, Mom. Thank you all for watching today. And please subscribe to this channel if you haven't. And check out our Catholic Truth Living YouTube channel if you haven't. It's our second YouTube channel, which we just started, and it's dedicated solely to fatherhood, motherhood, parenting, relationships, the culture war, raising rebels, pro-life, and more. So it's a little bit of a different scope than the apologetics and spirituality we do here. It's about forming families and good relationships. So check that out and subscribe there if you haven't. Please support our ministry and follow us on social media below. God bless you all.